So you've gotten down to less than 10% body fat, single digit, which is great. So you said, what's the formula for calculating that again? How do you know your lean body fat?
Yeah, so as a general approach, what you do is you take your height in centimeters, you multiply it by a certain factor, that gives you your approximate lean body mass. That's a good harbinger of where you're at. That's a very crude way of doing it. And what you do is then you do a little bit more math, and you divide that by your total body weight. You subtract 1, and that gives you your approximate percentage. The better way, of course, to do it is like DEXA scan and all that stuff. See, guys, here's what you don't understand, is that Peter, being like so much younger than me and so getting in shape and so like rocking the muscle milk right now, I have to keep up. Understand? I got to keep up. I got to stay like, got to run with the pack. So, got to do what you got to do here. But that's why we're going to plug muscle milk here, which I have to say is absolutely awesome. Peter, tell them about your experience with muscle milk.
Bro, muscle milk is today's sponsor, actually, and muscle milk is beautiful. They come in 25 grams of protein, 35, even 40 at the gas stations, and it's a quick, nice way to get in your actual protein for the day, especially if you're trying to lose weight or you're trying to just build up on that muscle. Because for me, I get anywhere from 150 to almost 200 grams of protein a day, and that's a lot of chicken. So I like to take a little shortcut with muscle milk. Helps me immensely. Also goes through you quicker, so you're not adding on unnecessary weight like you would be with something else. So, guys, muscle milk, go for it.
Muscle milk. I'm telling you, man. As far as nutrition is concerned, it's like the beautiful part about these protein shakes, and I would recommend that you only get the 40 gram or above, because the rate of return on how many calories you put in your body versus how much protein you're getting, that seems to be the best average among the two. And you're right.
Agreed.
It's a lot of chicken to try to get down 200 grams of protein each day. That's Colonel Sanders type level of chicken. It's a lot of chicken.
Yeah, you're gonna have to have like at least almost 2 pounds of chicken every day to hit that.
Yeah,
which is a lot, and that's expensive. That's about at the grocery store if you're buying that. That's going to be a lot.
Yeah. And if you're trying to like cut, right? You know this, Peter. It's like you got to have like a 500 calorie deficit each day. And you're trying to just get all those grams of protein in just straight food. You're going to be rocking like 3,500 or 4,000 calories a day. Probably not where you want to be. So, So by all means, protein shakes, muscle milk, we love it. Go get some, but not the ones that we want to buy. We're going to buy ours first. Then you can go get yours. All right. Good enough.
It says my lean body mass is 140 pounds.
No. Well, here's the thing.
But
here's the thing, though. That I'm sure whatever you're looking at online, that is probably not taking into account how long you've been resistance training and all of that. So there are ways to... Yeah. So there are ways to...
Back in my old weight. Let me see what it is. It's still pretty. It's funny because I actually looked at this guy online and he was around 194, and before I was 200. He went from 194 to 150 something almost. Bro was shredded. I mean, completely. I mean, he was probably like between 1% and 5%. Like he was down there. So that's what I'm thinking. Like mine would be 149. Definitely seems a little low. It's probably closer to 160, but very interesting.
Yeah, so that's the thing too. Like, there are ways to determine like about how much muscle mass you've added based on how long you've been working out or resistance training in particular. So it's not like a super exact science. I mean, there's a DEXA scan and all that stuff. But here's an easy way to know, guys. Like, honest to God, although most people like carry weight a little bit differently, like where your body deposits fat is a little bit different. If you're a dude, you generally carry extra weight in your abdomen. It's basically from the top of your rib cage to about like your waistline. So
we can tell.
you start hitting milestones. So the idea is not so much about the body fat percentage, but it's about your appearance too. So you'll start noticing like generally when you fall below like 15%, you get into like 14, you start seeing like the upper row of your abs. And then as you go further and further down, you get to around 10% or so, your second row shows. And then by the time you're like 8, unless you have just like the most underdeveloped abs in the world, you're going to see every row of abs you have. And for most people, that's, it's 3 rows of abs.
So I'm right around 10, get into 8. It's kind of funny actually you mentioned that because I've noticed like different things are changing at different rates. Like my arms now look a lot different, and there's like curves that I didn't see before. I started doing leg day, which really shored things up. But it's funny because, like you said, right where my waistline is, right below that ab, there's no fat, there's nothing, and then right above that, that's where everything is being stored. And like right below that, there's nothing. Below my waist, there's absolutely nothing there, which is just it's just so funny to me because I can see like muscles that I didn't know were there, just like slightly poking out a little bit. I'm just like, LOL, that's funny. Like it's nice to see. So going from 10 to 8 to, probably ending up around 7 or 6, I think is going to really change the game,
Yeah. And like, know way more about this than I do, and who literally their lives depend on it. Like they're fitness gurus, these guys are awesome, and they've really dedicated their life to fitness and also, frankly, making a living at it. They basically are all of the opinion that like once you get south of 15, you're kind of well on your way to being as lean as you want to be, and then it's kind of up to you. The hard part is getting south of 15. That's a major, major milestone. It doesn't sound like still sounds like, oh, well, that should be easy enough to do. But most people, even healthy people, sit like around 20%. And 5% of a larger number, let's say, is a lot bigger than 5% of a body weight when you're much less at, say, 12% body fat. So it gets progressively easier over time. And the thing is, too, just beyond the aesthetics of it, beyond our own reason I'm doing it. There's the health concern too. It's like if you have less body fat, that means you're eating better. That means you're exercising. That means presumably you're in better shape overall. You know what I'm saying? So, guys, if you can do it and don't get like anorexic either, like basically if you're sitting, you can, from what I understand, you can sit healthy between like 8 and 10 percentage body fat as a guy, and you can maintain that without going crazy. But dudes who get to like, oh my God, like those guys at like competition phase that are like 5%, maybe a top 6, they're literally like 1 to 2% above absolute necessary to sustain life body fat percentage. Yeah. There's not a lot of room, not a lot of margin for error there. So there's no reason to do that, and there's no reason, and no one really can maintain that unless you're just a complete genetic
100%. Yeah. But let's actually talk about this, because this actually brings me into something that I've wanted to bring up. Ooh. The body positivity movement, getting into encouraging people to keep this, keep on, let's be real, they're fat, and they say, you're fat phobic or something if you want to get skinny, if you like being skinny, if you enjoy being that. Okay, first off, there's the obvious problem of health concerns, where a higher fat percentage is going to destroy your body at some point. Like you say, you start getting at 20, 25%, you start getting up there, you're a heckin' chonker, as I like to call them. It's a problem, and everything that you're secreting and coming out of you is also gross. It's not healthy. And you have this giant size of people who've come full circle, because at first they were like, okay, all these models are too skinny. We want to just be ourselves and be loved for ourselves. And then it went to like, oh, we're encouraging this very fat, do whatever the fuck you want lifestyle. And it's just hilarious to see come full circle, honestly.
It is. And I'm so glad we're talking about this, because despite what we had on the list for today's episode, guys out there in the audience, this is what Peter and I do. We just pick a topic. We just do.
We'll get to the balloons in a second, but I got to nail this shit.
And it's magic. It's podcast magic. No, but for real, I think this happens in so many different subjects. You could go on and on about it, but it's like, just like you said, it went from you're too skinny to, okay, it's an unreasonable expectation of what, your body fat composition should be or how you should look, to having basically a healthy weight. It doesn't have to be super thin or super cut or super ripped, into no, now it's just as healthy to be obese. I mean, there is a large contingent of people who are saying this, and it is factually incorrect. It is scientifically easily refutable. You know why you don't see a lot of people in their 80s who are, extremely obese?
They don't make it to their 80s.
They don't make it because it's unhealthy. You don't see a lot. Yeah. You don't see a ton of people with diabetes and other related illnesses who tend to have reasonable body fat percentages. It generally is. It just is. It skews toward those who are carrying a lot more extra weight in terms of body fat. That's the difference
Totally.
between meat and body fat. And we know about that.
And I hate to break it down by gender because it's 2023, but I'm going to keep it real with you. Almost every single person I've noticed who has something to say about it on the side of being unhealthy has been, a woman. And I get it. There's a lot of unfair beauty standards and a lot of things from that have created negative connotations and, a lack of feeling like you matter or that your body type is acceptable. But, like you said, it starts to step into a genuinely unhealthy area, which is what nobody acknowledges. And everyone says, like I said, you're fat phobic or this thing where there are companies now that don't make anything for skinny people. Some people just are skinny, by the way. And this is funny now because it's going to come more full circle because I have some friends who are just very skinny naturally and they can't find clothes to fit them now, and now all these people are making plus size clothing or whatever, like what have you. And if you don't make a size large enough, somebody's going to complain like, meh, 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 meh. Personally, I want to start a clothing brand where if you are over a certain size, you are not allowed to purchase it. Actually, I really just want to. I want to do that. I think it'd be so funny, and I'd love to hear the backlash. But it's not even. The funny thing is, it's mostly. Let's be real. It's mostly in America, and it's not about health. It's about you have to accept everybody, and no, I don't have to accept your unhealthy lifestyle. And, this will probably come back to haunt me in 5 or 6 years, but I'm totally fine being fat phobic. I don't want to die because I'm drowning in my McDonald's Cokes every day, man. Like it's a tough life. It's a tough life.
It is. I mean, those are unforced errors. And it's like, you're right. I also find that so shockingly unself-aware of people who are like, no, it's not only should I be incredibly obese, but this is just as healthy as if I was not, and just like an average body BMI and an average or healthy range of body fat. Literally, there are people, billions of people around the world, struggling to have enough to eat, and here are certain people wanting me to believe that they are just as healthy as me, as you said, doing nothing, spending their entire lives in a McDonald's drive-thru. It is shocking. It is idiotic in every conceivable way. And honestly, if there are people, I can totally get that there are people who kind of give up. Like maybe they've been, very overweight their whole lives. Maybe they are, they have a genetic predisposition for that, obviously. But just to give you guys, out there a little bit of context, I remember a time not that long ago where if you were thin, if you were cut, you were considered as a guy like small, like you weren't masculine at all. Like the going body type a couple of decades ago was like,
it wasn't. Yeah, no, it's crazy. You were considered kind of a bitch in all respects of the word because you were like lean, and now there's like a big bulking period,
Absolutely. So, guys, to the extent anybody out there is thinking that this is just objectively true, that just being very overweight in an unhealthy way is just natural. I promise you, a lot of this is being influenced just by whims and people wanting something to be true when it's not. But just honestly, just be healthy. Just do whatever you can do to be healthy, and everything
do what
else
you can do. Yeah, because like Will said, people have a certain disposition. Let's be real. If you're from a lower socioeconomic status, you're going to have less access to the foods that you need, and that's not necessarily your fault. But that's not who we're talking about. We're talking about people who are blatantly encouraging this lifestyle that is, frankly, by all means, killing and poisoning your body. We don't blame you for that, but if you actually are one of those people, like disrespectful to so many people out there. And one thing I will say, actually touching on the thing about the guy's body image, another misconception out there is that it only affects women, but there are a large amount of guys, and you'll see this. It's actually a more of a movement I've seen a lot recently of just guys going to the gym and really getting fit. I mean, they are looking immaculate. They're looking stunning, and there's a lot of pressure in that area too for guys to look a certain way. And if you don't look that way, there's a sense of giving up, almost like you said, Will. Like I have a friend who's just kind of like he doesn't have the time, frankly, or the resources to eat like he wants to, and he's kind of given up on it. And it's kind of tough to see, but it affects everybody. You're in a culture where it affects everybody. And let's be real, on both sides, people who are incredibly fit and lean are worshipped on the women's side and the men's side, And there's a lot of problems with it, a lot of complex issues, but there's no need to scream from the rooftops that you got to eat this way. And you body positive influencers, I hope you all go to hell because you are terrible people, and I hope I never meet you.
Well said, sir. And I love the trial balloon you floated about saying you're going to have a line of clothing that if you're a certain size, you're not allowed to wear it, because that leads to actual balloons. So, Peter, I don't know. Have you heard about this weird thing that's going on? Everyone's heard about it. So, like, the United States military suddenly had to be tasked with the mission of shooting down balloons all over the place. Balloons.
Yeah. This is something I didn't think of because I saw an article and it was like, why have they been in the sky this long? And I realized that the balloon is such an old method of like transportation and tech. It's so old that it was actually hard to shoot down, right? It's actually a complicated problem. This is like when I had this test one time and the math was so basic, I forgot how to do it because it was just so basic. It was long division. I was like, I have no idea how to do long division because I've been in algebra and pre-cal for so long. Mm-hmm. The fighter jets can't just go and do it like they normally would. Obviously, they did shoot it down, but it was actually like a little bit of a problem because they're balloons. Like, how do you shoot down balloons, you know?
Yeah, Peter,
it's like a fighter jet going 500 miles an hour.
Yeah, exactly. And I can only think about, like, I mean, obviously, like, you know, these pilots are among the best in the world. You know,
for sure.
School. I mean, these guys
they're American pilots. Come on, we know they are.
Exactly. But like, these guys are awesome, right? I can feel like, you know, while they're flying, you know, do they have like, you know, the soundtrack from Top Gun going on?
I wish Top Gun came out or these balloons came out right around that time. That would have been funny. Perfect marketing.
Right. But like, think about this. Like, they're trained in multi-million-dollar programs for each of them. I mean, effectively millions of dollars are spent on each one of these pilots, training them. Obviously, they have the courage to go do this kind of dangerous work overall, being a fighter pilot. But like, can you imagine kind of like the highlight of your career, at least at this point, is, okay, we need you to find a balloon. We need you to shoot down a balloon. Oh, and by the way, it's going to be really hard. It's easier to shoot down an enemy fighter than it is to literally pop a balloon just sort of like haphazardly floating in the sky. Can you imagine the radio chatter on that? I tell you, I can't wait if they ever release the audio of that radio chatter. It must be priceless, absolutely priceless. You should fly by with a pin and just pop it.
They're probably laughing. Also, the jet itself, I don't even know if they were F-35s, but F-35s are $70 million. So you're operating this, I mean, almost $100 million piece of equipment and just popping a balloon. But let's talk, like, everyone wants to know, what are the balloons? First thing that came was Chinese intelligence, right? Or something, trying to get stuff. The thing that I didn't like about this, wait, is your mic on?
Is it on? Can you hear me?
Oh, yeah. The thing that I hate about this is that I don't know if you guys know what a satellite is, but a satellite can get images and shadows up to 6 inches on the ground from space. They don't need a balloon to float over. They have their own satellites, and they can get images of probably whatever they want. A balloon, it's harder to direct. You're not going to use it for taking pictures. So that begs the question, what intelligence is going to be like, oh yeah, a balloon, and what intelligence is using it for surveillance?
Yeah. You know, Peter, I get the sense, and you're exactly right. I mean, the idea that the highest technological capacity that China or any other state has to conduct surveillance is literally floating a balloon and hoping for the best is ludicrous. So to the extent that, you know, it sounds like to me that this is just them saying, hey, what kind of capacity do we have to, you know, to basically penetrate a nation's airspace with this kind of tool, and what could we do with it? How long did it take them to detect it? You know, I think that it's all about just kind of probing. That's all this is. Mm-hmm. But because it is astonishing to me that the primary discussion around national security right now has to do with balloons. Balloons. Yeah. In 2023, balloons. This is like the World's Fair, 1908 or something. And this is completely consumed. The President of the United States finally had to say something about it. Like, that's how much discussion there's been everywhere. And, you know, my feeling is like, on top of it, like, okay, well, is this kind of an anomaly? What's going on? So there's an article in the Scientific American from just the other day saying that at any given time, and this is just what we know about, and it's coming from a variety of sources, that there are at least 100 on any given day at any given time of unidentified objects, specifically balloons, that are just sort of like on their own, just willy-nilly, haphazardly, just floating at various altitudes and across different paths across North America. Now, that's what they know about. There could theoretically be, it would almost look like party balloons being released all at once everywhere around the country. There could be literally thousands of these objects floating when we've got thousands of airplanes flying at varying altitudes, flight paths. I mean, how this hasn't created an issue before now is beyond my understanding.
It kind of is, because it's funny, because 2 times I feel like I've seen something up in the sky, and you'll notice, guys, a lot of satellites are kept right within orbit almost. So they're way above the stratosphere. They're almost outside of the Earth's sphere, but they aren't. And they're just coasting there. And if you see them, you can actually, if you're very careful, sometimes you can see satellites going over the sky. Only when it's at night, they'll have a light, and they'll just be it'll be too slow to be an airplane or too fast to be an airplane. And they'll just be like a little prick. And it's most likely a satellite, but there's a ton of debris that comes into Earth. And that's what the atmosphere is for. It's for burning up stuff that comes through there, not to mention us breathing on the ground. But you'll see satellites, you'll see shooting stars, you'll see meteorites, and balloons aren't entirely uncommon. And my guess is, if it had just been one balloon that came over, I would have guessed it was honestly just a balloon that went wayward. But the fact that there are 3, that's an interesting question, because how do you let 3 balloons go over,
Yeah,
and there's video of them being blown up from the ground. You can see a jet come through and just blow it out of the sky,
I mean, it almost looks like an exercise, who has the ability to pilot these F-22s or F-35s to such a degree that we can kind of pull up on them using this $100 million technology and literally pop a balloon and out of the sky. It has to be true, because it's so absurd. That's my feeling.
It is.
There's been a few that have been shot down. There are others that were identified, or they can't quite say what they are. But then, of course, it brings out all the lunatics who think that this is just part of a psyop operation, that there are really UFOs out there.
The aliens are here now, and other stuff. Yeah, aliens are definitely coming in balloons.
Definitely
Their launch strategy.
Yeah. Yes, just hiding in plain sight. They actually still think it's 1898 on Earth, and this is how they're going to blend in and hide in plain sight. Got it, guys. Absolutely. Although I think, though, that form of transportation seems to be a lot safer than Norfolk Southern trains these days. Have you heard about this?
Yeah, but hold on. I actually want to blow this up real quick, because this is actually really interesting to me. I'm going to share my screen real quick, and we're just going to take a look at this balloon image, because this is really interesting to me. This is what they claim to be a Chinese balloon, right? And a jet. I don't know. Also, I don't know if you guys realized how big these balloons actually are. Look, this is a jet. This is an F-35 jet. Let's look at how long is an F-35 jet, right? It's around 51 feet. Right. This balloon is bigger than that. This is probably a 60, 70-foot balloon. These things are not small. And you can tell because there's literally a little satellite or something appended to the balloon, right?
Yeah. And it could be bigger than that, Peter, because if that balloon is fairly off in the distance from where the jet
is, because they might not even be around the same altitude, but it could be fairly big. And a lot of what you guys don't actually know is that a lot of balloons are used for monitoring the weather in different areas, and that's how they pick up on stuff. So you'll notice, I don't know if you know how large a camera would have to be on here to actually get anything for the ground. It'd have to be very large. And what we're looking at mostly is panels, which I can only assume are probably solar panels. I mean, this thing doesn't even have anything for directions, and a couple little gizmos up here. But I mean, it's really not some intelligence or aliens. It's very clearly identifiable.
It looks like a beach ball that got loose at a concert and just wound up in the atmosphere.
Yeah, let's look at what are they called? Let me see. There's literally a video, balloon being blown up. It's literally God damn it. What do I type in? Balloon being blown up over the sky.
You gotta be more precise.
There's a video. Oh, wait. I think this is it. This has to
Okay,
be it.
here we go.
Oh my gosh. I love this.
Come on. Here we
I've got news things these days. I have way too many ads, and look at this. Ridiculous. Okay.
Here
Load
we
up.
go.
Come on. Oh god. Loading an ad.
They're just platforms for ads at this point.
Please. They are. That's all they are. It's so annoying.
Oh, you know, chess.
Look how many ads. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. They're ridiculous. Oh, look, the army advertising over the balloon thing. Like, hey, you'll get to shoot down balloons.
You gotta love algorithms, bro.
Look at this.
Okay, here we go. Here's the balloon. Okay, floating out there. What is it? God, that could be anything, right? Based on this camera angle. Okay, here we go.
I love that our cameras have gotten so good that we can actually do this.
Okay, here we go. It's got the jet's got. Here we go. Okay, are those the missiles that are shooting past?
They just blew it out of the sky. Hold up. I don't like this cut. Somebody cut this to where you couldn't show it.
Yeah.
This is the balloon that just got. Yeah, look at that.
Yeah, national security purposes, we can't show a
ripped
missile.
it to shreds.
Can't show a missile blowing up a balloon. That might give away some major secrets.
So I'm assuming that this is the jet, this is the balloon, and this is the missile trail, or whatever they use. I'm surprised they didn't even just use a machine gun and just blow it out of the sky.
But see, that's what's so hilarious. I mean, how many, like, what, $1 million maybe on that missile to blow up a balloon?
Yeah. I wonder, because a lot of the missile tracking is from like heat tracking and signatures like that. A balloon doesn't really have a heat signature unless it's a hot air balloon, and even then it has to be strong enough. So I just wonder like what they were doing to be like, we gotta hit this balloon. What are we gonna hit it with?
Major threat. Look out, everybody. We're being invaded by party fair. So just,
the jet could have just flew through the balloon and been fine. Maybe not, but I'm assuming. I don't know.
Peter, I could see you being like the number 2 behind the pilot, just being like,
you remember in Top Gun when the bird gets in the engine? And it's like, oh, that's actually a real problem because they normally don't fly at an altitude where birds can fly. And so they were flying so low altitude that it actually became a problem.
I also wonder how thick, like, the balloon lining is. Like, I'm assuming they were like, oh, if we fly through it, we might just have this giant canopy engulfing the plane while we're trying to take this thing out of the sky and not die in the process. Can you imagine being killed by virtue of a balloon?
Exactly. And actually, let's pull up. I'm going to pull up one more thing. This is actually really interesting. This is the size of an actual weather balloon. So this will give you a bit more context on how big it is. These are people.
Ooh.
This is a truck, right?
Yeah.
And it's huge. It's huge.
Dude, look on the top right. That's like great perspective. See that? Wow. So I wonder if that's like the approximate size of the balloon that they shot down. You know,
it's probably fairly close. These things are really large.
They really are. Look at that.
Yeah.
So I guess that's why it would have to be like whatever it was, 55 or 60,000 feet in the air to not be seen by literally everybody in its path for a swath of 100 miles in every direction. That's crazy.
Yeah, no, and this is what I was saying. These are right out of the stratosphere. Like these things are extremely high up in the air.
Yeah.
Let me see altitude of a weather balloon. Planes normally fly around 30,000 feet, and yeah, look, this thing is flying over 100,000 feet above that. So this is flying 3 times higher than a plane. It's much smaller, so you're not going to be able to see it, which is why none of you guys normally see balloons.
Yeah.
125 miles away. Yeah, and that's most likely what it is. I mean, weather balloons are, it looks very similar.
Mm-hmm.
You'll see here they have, they're not showing the tech on it, but it's going to be something like that. And yeah, these things fly so high, you will almost never see them.
Now, the administration did say that they sort of ruled out at least the ones that got shot down. At least that's what the administration is saying, that the balloons that were shot down, they recovered pieces of it and determined that they were not, in fact, weather balloons, that they believe it was designed for some form of surveillance or what have you. I guess they had to legitimize it. It would sound pretty bad if you shot a weather balloon out of the air when you don't even know the origin. That's what really got me. That a lot of what is being stated now on an official basis is that the balloons are not necessarily from China. They're not necessarily from research institutes. They're not necessarily from like weather observation centers. Like they don't know. They just know that there's a balloon where we didn't expect to see a balloon. And so we're going to shoot it down. And so it just adds to not the intrigue, but kind of the insanity of this. It is astonishing to me that most news could be consumed on the subject of unidentified balloons. That's where we are right now. That's where we are currently in 2023. Balloons.
And it's a really smart move as far as like what you're actually looking at, because like you said, it's such an old piece of tech.
Yeah.
It's another thing that literally, in all terms of the word or the phrase, allows it to fly under the radar. Like it literally flies under the radar because they're not monitoring. They're monitoring for a couple things, guys. Okay, first off, the government's not going to tell you this. They're monitoring for missiles. I don't know if you remember this a couple years ago that Hawaii got a text message from the government saying an incoming ballistic missile was going to hit.
Yeah, I remember
They
that.
accidentally sent that. So that I feel like was way underplayed. It's like, haha, but when you really think about that, it's that island is closer to those countries and it is well prepared for an intercontinental ballistic missile, an ICBM. They had that in place. That was like 10 years ago or something.
Yeah,
they are prepared for missiles to come this way. There are missiles that are specifically engineered to fly right over the water to escape detection. There's missiles that are made to fly so fast that you can't possibly shoot them down in time.
Yeah.
But I guarantee you, West Coast and East Coast have anti-missile things, and that's what they're looking for. But they're not looking for balloons, right?
Right.
And that's why it's also crazy. And I love what you said, Will, about it not being actually identifiable, because if it's not from China, it's not from whoever, and it's just purely unidentified, that's the real concern.
Yeah, it makes it even worse. I think that actually adds to the level of danger. I mean, I can't help but laugh anyway at the idea that a balloon in and of itself could create so much danger, so much palace intrigue, so much like psyop speculation and so forth. But when you really, in all seriousness now, as technology has increased exponentially over several decades, it's the simplicity of certain tools for nefarious purposes that are really the most dangerous. I mean, I know this is not a direct comparison, but some of the worst, terrorist attacks are conducted in the simplest of ways, with the simplest of means. Nothing dramatically spectacular. And so I'm totally on board with very actively monitoring, investigating, like, hey, what is this object that just has no apparent legitimate business hanging over our airspace? But when you look, when you consider that, like, this is going on every day, hundreds of these objects are just out there floating around in flight paths and everything else. Forget about all like the incredible conspiracy theory speculation. I think that's a bunch of nonsense. But just like the simple, basic, like safety issue of the thousands of planes that are over our airspace at any given time. Yeah. It's bad enough, dude. It's bad enough when you're sitting on an airplane, you kind of look out, you look down, and you see a friggin' plane fly under you a few thousand feet. That is friggin' terrifying. Can you imagine being a pilot or just oh, by the way, there's these objects floating around?
Yeah. Most mid-air collisions happen in the middle of the day, actually. Yeah. They don't happen at night. They happen in the middle of the day because there's a false sense of security and there's so much airspace. You never think you're going to run into anybody. But on September 11th, there's this huge mid-air collision that, plane went... No. Okay, we can cut that out. But that was a joke. That was a joke, everybody, if you didn't get what I was alluding to. But no, I totally agree. And I think it's so interesting. And another thing that people don't really, I feel like, get... I mean, there's conspiracies, but there's things we just kind of know. Like, the government's technology is estimated to be 100 to 300 years, if not 500 years, ahead of what the public is currently using. And another thing that people don't really know is that almost every single modern piece of technology that you are using was a project initially started by the military. The internet was called DARPA, and it was started by the military for communications, and then it eventually reached mass things. The microwave, I'm pretty sure, was a thing by the military. A ton of huge medical advances were all started by the military. So as much as people kind of hate on the military, at least young kids, I know, because they're not from that generation, they see it as a big waste of money because for some odd reason they don't understand national security. The military is honestly responsible for most of the stuff we're currently actually using. Not the light bulb, sadly, but a lot of stuff that we're using that's actually considered still high tech.
Yes. And on the subject of high tech, apparently Norfolk Southern has no interest in anything high tech. Peter, I'm sure you're aware of this awful scenario in East Palestine, Ohio. And I mean, just to recap very quickly. So obviously there was a train derailment, but it was preceded by this enormous fire on at least one of the train cars out of 141. Now, as the background of this is even more disturbing than the amount of dangerous chemicals that were just obviously just packed into these cars.
God.
Yeah, but Peter, get this. Are you ready for this?
Yeah.
So apparently, trains and train cars, there's no such thing as like independent braking systems on any of the cars, even throughout an entire train. So in this particular instance, it was 141 cars spread out over more than 2 miles. Now, as huge as that sounds, I got to tell you, a couple of months ago, I was out west. I was driving through. We're out like in the Mojave Desert. There's a ton of train tracks out there, obviously going to and from the West Coast in LA. And because it's so wide open, you can literally see 4 miles in virtually every direction. So as you're going down the highway, a lot of the train tracks kind of parallel the highway.
Yeah.
And so there was one instance where we're driving through and a train that seemed to go on forever had 89 cars. Now, and again, that was massive. To look at it, you realize just how immense of a unit this is, a combined unit. Norfolk Southern had 141 cars, more than 2 miles.
That's a lot. That's crazy.
Crazy. But here's what's even crazier. The only braking mechanism on that entire long train,
the front of the train, isn't it?
Is at the very front of the train. But what makes it even worse is that the only way to obviously stop the cars behind is that the engine stops, then the first car, then the second car, then the third car. You would think, oh, well, I guess that makes sense. But adding to the possibility for derailment in that very archaic braking system is that the attached cars are not stacked by weight. So you might have a very light, container, a couple of few back from, say, the engine, followed by a container that is 10 or 20 times heavier than the one in front of it. And this is spread out completely haphazardly with no logic associated with it whatsoever, other than just, hey, whatever container gets here first, you get hooked up, then the next one, then the next one, then the next one. So literally, there's, Peter, if you can pull it up, there is footage.
It's
cool.
insane.
Yeah, there's like, let's see what we got here.
Good Lord.
Oh, yeah. I mean, that's the explosion and the aftermath.
This is the other thing, kind of. Balloons and trains aren't that far apart. Like, trains are extremely simple. They fit on the tracks, and that's it. And there's a pretty bad history. There's not a lot of them, but when a train accident happens, a derailment literally derails everything. And this happened to be chemicals. And, I can only imagine what business or potentially military thing is suffering from this. Because, I mean, that's no joke. Like, that's an explosion. That, like, look at this.
It's unbelievable. I mean, it's almost incomprehensible. Not just the size of the explosion, but what is burning. You have these incredibly toxic chemicals that are just burning and floating into the air. In East Palestine, of course, most people haven't heard of it, but it's only like 40 miles west or northwest of Pittsburgh. So, and I think it was traveling west. So presumably it was traveling from or through or around Pittsburgh, which is a densely populated area. If it had derailed there and had an explosion there, I mean, what's happening to the people in East Palestine is terrible. But can you imagine if it was a major metro area and this happened? Oh, my God. Yeah.
It's funny because, I mean, it's not funny, but when you said Palestine, I thought you said like Palestine. I was like, why are we talking about the Middle East? But I had no idea, actually. But yeah, this is crazy. I don't know if you guys know how easy it is to actually derail a train. It is extremely easy. They're on tracks that are, an inch and a half wide, and they are extremely heavy things that are just on these tracks. And it doesn't take much to do something like this, actually. And I'll bet there's a solid history of train accidents like this happening. But yeah, no, this is tough.
I mean, Peter, do you realize that effectively the braking technology and like the stacking logic, if there is even any logic around where they put cars attached to the engine, is less complex than like a toy engine set? because at least with the toy engine set, the attached cars are all of approximately the same weight, right?
Yeah.
But it's the same technology. It's the exact same technology, if you can even call it that. Peter, it's so bad that this is how they test to see if an axle is too hot in order to continue. It's not just a sensor that alerts, like, the operators of the train.
Yeah.
They literally, in 2023, they literally go out to the affected car and they take like a wax stick and hold it to the axle. And if it starts to melt, that's all the evidence they need. That's as precise of a science as it is to determine whether or not they should continue, whether this is just a little too hot or just not quite hot enough to continue. We're literally living in 1880. When it comes to train travel, it's 1880.
Yeah.
There is nothing more advanced than that in today's world, where they're carrying those chemicals. It's insane.
And you guys might be wondering, like, why are trains like that, like updated? No one's building new trains, guys. It's kind of been dying since, I don't know, the last 100 years. But it's still cheap enough. And a train car is just a box on wheels. And the only thing they have to worry about is the engine. So it's extremely cheap mode of transportation. And the rail lines are still across. But no one's building new trains. No one's updating new trains for tech because they don't really need it. But actually, this is actually interesting. I just pulled up a list of all the train crash incidents, and there's about one there's about 10 every decade. This is actually interesting.
Look at that.
Killed 4, killed 6, killed 1, killed 8, 2, 1, 3. This is crazy because I actually didn't realize this. So we're up to 2 right now. This is interesting, but there's about 10 every decade. They were watching them in the 1980s, but I mean, this is crazy, man. And it's funny because, in the 1910s, I mean, we're having almost as many train crashes in 1910 as you have in, 19 or 2010 or something, like Will said, in 100 years, there hasn't been much advancement, right? Like, look, in the 1850s, there were less train crashes than there were in most of the more recent decades.
Yeah, right. And I don't think that this list even takes into account like near issues that must be happening constantly. Why wouldn't it happen constantly? It's the same precarious situation every time they get underway on a track. Yeah. So it's not just like commercial freight. This happens on passenger lines all the time, right?
A lot of these were passenger lines. I remember a big one that happened a couple years ago. I can't remember which one it was, but I mean, look at the 162 people injured. Like, anytime you get that amount of injuries, it's a passenger car. I was just on a train. I took a train from Boston to New York, and it's no joke.
Were you on the Excella?
I was not. I was on Amtrak.
Yes. Well, Amtrak, yep. I'm telling you, like, I've taken that trip a few times, like from DC back and forth, up and down. Mm-hmm. And no lie, I mean, like, you're going over tracks that you can't help but notice, like, you are flying down these tracks. And it's great, like, as far as getting where you want to go. But then if you have an opportunity to see, like, adjacent track, you realize, wow, I'm going like 80 miles an hour on something that looks like it rusted out and was useless 30 years ago. It's just sort of like, please just get me there in one piece. Please, can we do that?
They don't update them. And this is actually interesting because I'm just going to car crash this morning. It was crazy.
Again? What happened?
Again, bro, I was going across the intersection. The light turned green. The left turning lane had just finished a little late. So thank God I had slowed down a little bit because people in the left turning lane, they feel like they can keep going because they're assholes. Well, they kept going, and then they all disappeared, and I was about in the middle of the intersection, and this car comes out of nowhere. Whoa. I don't see this car until it's directly in front of me in the left turning lane as I'm crossing the intersection. And I slammed on my brakes and honked at them, but I was probably like 5 to 10 feet from T-boning them because they ran the left turning lane as I was crossing the intersection. I did not see them until they were in front of me, and I didn't register it happened until they were already in the other intersection. I was like, bro, you cannot do that. And it's funny because my friend was behind me, and they saw the whole thing happen, and they were like, wow, I am so surprised you didn't get an accident. I'm like, I'm surprised I didn't get an accident either. Yeah.
You just have, honestly, dude, you just have to assume that everyone on the road around you is not paying attention.
Yeah. Let's talk about this too, because I've noticed, I don't know if you've noticed, but I drive a good amount. I have noticed an increasing amount of people just not care about red lights. Yeah. They keep running them. I have seen more people run red lights in the last couple of months than I have in my entire life. They are. It's not even like close. They are. I saw this person kept pulling up to a red light, and they just ran it. Like after a couple seconds, they're just like, you know, fuck it, I'm just going to run it. I'm just like, you were insane, and I hope to see you get T-boned. I really do.
I'll tell you, it's like I think there's a slight difference between, well, let's say you mentioned like people turning left and the light's turning red, and they're kind of near the intersection, but they're almost attached, like part of the analogy, but like a train. It's sort of like, you know, everyone knows what's going on. No one is surprised. Okay, there's going to be 2 or 3 cars that make that final turn left or whatever. But there is something completely different between like, okay, we're all at a stop and the light's been red for 2 or 3 seconds and I'm just going to fly through it at 60 miles an hour. Like, you're trying to get somebody killed if you're doing that. And God help you if you do. You know what I'm saying? But that's why I just assume, over time, like when I see a green, I don't just go. I am assuming someone is going to run that red light for at least a couple seconds. And then, boom, then I'll get it. But come on, I can't tell you how many accidents I've avoided over the years because I assumed someone is going to run this light for no reason other than that they're an idiot or they're not paying attention or whatever it is. I must have stayed out of 100 accidents that way over the years. So, yeah, it's just for real. Just assume on the road is an idiot. Everyone on the road is an idiot. If you operate under that assumption, you have at least a better chance of not getting into an accident.
There's another guy. There was a smart car who cut me off as I was getting off of an exit, and I honked at them, right? And they deliberately tried to like slam on their brakes, tried to get me into an accident, and then I got off on the same exit they ended up getting off of, a couple exits down, and they literally stopped on the exit ramp to get onto the highway to try and get me into an accident. So I like swerved around them. They were trying to get me in a wreck, and it was just crazy. And it's funny. There's a saying I love that says common sense isn't common. And we're living in a world where green doesn't mean go because people are at their phones. Red means keep going because you can probably make it. Yellow means speed up.
Yeah.
You know, all these foods mean eat as much as you want and, you know, don't worry about your health. And there's just so many contradictions. And it is insane. Driving is wild.
It's all just part of the larger "it's my journey" philosophy, where facts don't matter. It's all about what I subjectively want to do at that moment, and you all have to get on board with it. Bullshit.
And that's how everybody drives. Driving is the ultimate like crux of that because everyone's doing what they want to do, and everyone's driving how they want to drive, and it is insane. And you know, I'll be the first to admit, like I do the same thing sometimes. I do what you do sometimes. There's a line of cars going in the left turn. I kind of think of it as a wall. And you can make that last 1 or 2. But if you're going to be flying through there by yourself, that is a problem, especially going that fast. But
no doubt.
Don't be an idiot, please. These Chargers that come up on me, these Mustangs, these BMWs, these whatever type of cars. It's so by car model to a point. There's memes about all the cars that are assholes on the road. I'm sorry, if you drive a Charger, a Challenger, an old BMW that you think you're cool, but you're actually not because it's like 15 years old, a Ram 2500, don't listen to this podcast. I do not like you, and nobody else probably likes you either. Like, get off the road.
You will not wear his clothes and his clothing line, and you will not listen to this podcast.
You won't. Like, I don't want people I don't like consuming my media, and I really hope that that's not the type of people listening to this because I like to think you guys are a little bit smarter. And thank you for the recent subscribers on our other episode about Google. Hope you guys like that. But like, if you are one of those people, like, just you're going to get where you're going. You're going to save. Here, let me do some math for you. If you increase your speed by around 10 to 15 miles an hour over 30 minutes, you are going to save around 2 minutes of time. That means over an hour, you are only ever going to save around 4 minutes of time going 10 to 15 or almost 20 miles an hour over the speed limit. That is not worth the giant increase you get between swerving in lanes and following right behind people. Because if somebody had been right behind my ass when I had to brake for that accident, they would have run into me 100%.
And guys, I got to tell you, like, over time, this occurred to me. If I see someone driving like their life depends on getting where they're going at that particular moment, they're telling me and everybody else they're not that important. Because only an important person who thinks they're that important to be able to drive like that and put everybody else in danger. If you were really that important, you don't have to rush anywhere. Anywhere. And on top of it, I think that most people are not even that interested in getting to where they're going any faster.
They're interested in driving like an asshole.
Yeah, exactly. And just like there are beer goggles, right? There's like behind the wheel muscles that people get. Like it's as soon as they get behind a wheel, it's like blood sport, and it's like it's almost like it's a video game for them. It's like they're gaming, and this is just like a competition. And and like you're driving a 2,500-pound missile at 70 miles an hour, and I'm sorry, you can't handle it. And it's amazing that the second they're in their car, they're super brave. And the second they're not, they wouldn't even dream of doing what they do to other people face to face, like they do when they're behind the wheel of a car. I'll never understand it. I will never understand that kind of.
There's people like street racing and this other stuff. I see people flying down the highway. I mean, flying. People just don't get what 80 miles an hour actually is. Like, you ever just look at how fast the road is going, and you're going to get this close to me?
Yeah, right, exactly. And over such a short period of time, like Peter was saying, you're not really you're not improving your travel time all that much. All you're doing is put yourself at risk and everybody else at risk. And we don't want you to listen to this podcast. See, what Peter and I are interested in doing is not about building an audience. We want to start in the negative. We want to define who we don't want to listen to this podcast.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Everyone else will fall in the line. That's how it's going to work.
My friends always tell me about karma, which I don't really believe in to a point, because I always tell people who do stuff like that, I hope they get into an accident. They're just so terrible. I'm like, first off, I will put good money on the fact that they already have a history of accidents, and then second off, I'll put good money on the fact that I don't really care. But here's what I'm going to do, Will. Road rage. There's obviously a danger to it because I don't want to get shot. There are people who get shot for doing the wrong moves. So there are these special shops that pimp out your car. I'm talking bulletproof windows, plates on the bottom for bombs. I want to get bulletproof windows, really nail the stuff, tires you can't shoot out, and then anytime someone does it, I just brake check the hell out of them. We get in a wreck, I'm rich enough to pay for it, and I just keep doing that. And I really want to do that. I think that'd be so funny. And they can't do anything. If they try and shoot me, it's not going to do anything, you know?
Yes.
And they will have a warrant out.
Yes. Customized car is called the road rage package. And it's going to be, and you get that, and then you get a complimentary, like certain pieces of apparel from Peter's clothing line, but only if you meet certain size requirements.
For people who follow this close behind me, I want to get something hidden under my bumper that drops spike strips. I think that would be hilarious to see them get so close and they just spin out, or like an oil spill or something. I think it'd just be so funny. Like, oops, it dropped a bunch of nails, you know, like.
Yeah, I want like the James Bond, like circa 1965 package on my car. Absolutely, man. Yeah. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Oil slick, the smoke, the flipping license plate.
Exactly. Well, guys, comment below what you actually think those weather balloons are. If you think they're aliens, totally valid. If you think they're intelligence, or you may have seen some Reddit thread that actually uncovers the truth, let us know. Do some calculations. Comment your body fat percentage, right? And if you drive a car, comment what make and model, because we want to make sure that we can ban anybody who's not driving what we want. And if you own a Ferrari, call me and Will to let us test drive it, just to make sure that it's A-okay. But dude,
just let us test drive it for like a year.
Yeah. Just a 1 to 3 years, lease.
Yes, and when you're commenting, please, by all means, you have to put both your body fat percentage and your preferred clothing size, because Peter's going to make a determination.
Yeah. If you wear an XXXL, you're not allowed to listen to this podcast. Oh my gosh.
Yeah, guys, listen. I'm Will, my inimitable co-host Peter. Thank you for being here. Look forward to your comments. Subscribe. Don't be an ass. Definitely subscribe, and we will see you on the next episode. Take care, everybody.
Thanks, everyone.
1, 2